Steal this. Let me put your slides up. Okay. You have a different one? Okay, no worries. I will just stop that share and let it stare at you.
I am so sorry for being late. I was looking for my flying carpet and I couldn't find it anywhere. Also, my Aladdin costume is in dry cleaning, so apologize for that too. You've already forgotten about the first day lecture, I see. Am I that forgettable? Oof. Okay. Let's make up for lost time. Uh, it's you. I am looking for that. Yes. Thank you. Okay. We're in business. How's everybody doing? That point of the quarter, we can't even okay, it's okay. It's okay. I just ran all the way from the art building. So let me begin with an announcement on December 1st, which is a Monday. I have invited a dozen politicians to come and be yelled at by students. So it would be such a shame if the room wasn't full. You know, they always lecture you about the importance of civic engagement, the importance of voting in local elections, but our lawmakers don't really come to campus. They don't really hear from you. And so this is an opportunity for them to come and just listen. It's a very simple format, open mic, come, tell them about your concerns, whether you're advocating for a certain cause, or you're representing your community or representing yourself. Seriously, I really, really would love to see some of you there. And again, it's like such a golden opportunity to yell at politicians, which is definitely my favorite pastime. With power and representation come accountability and responsibility, and so let them hear from you. Okay? Well, I was going to begin this class thinking it was 2:30 and not 1:30 with this exercise where you would turn to the person next to you and you would ask them about their linguistic background. What is the relationship with the language of the languages that they speak? And the point of that exercise was to show you that really there is no such thing as a monolingual person. Even someone who thinks of themselves as monolingual has multiple linguistic, heritages in the background. If whether it was a Polish grandmother who used to make pierogies at home and taught you how to do it, or a French class you took in high school, or some sort of familiarity you have with, let's say, the Somali language, even if you don't speak it. This all counts, and I will go into why this history, why this multiplicity has been erased from our history. But unfortunately, because of my fuck up, there is no time to do that. So again, I apologize. So that was supposed to be the main point that really there is no such thing as a monolingual person. Definitely such a thing as a monolingual institution or monolingual state, but they try to manufacture a reality in their own image. And my argument would be they always emphatically fail. For instance, when I was a lowly undergraduate student at San Diego State, #PartyFull, don't laugh, I did not contribute to that reputation at all. But that reputation very much existed. Like my first semester there was a bust out of like 90 people with possession of marijuana, which at the time people would like get arrested, which is insane, like being arrested for marijuana. And if you're wondering why I'm telling you all this, I'll tell you. And then the vice president comes out and says, "Oh, well, these people are not representative of the student body." And literally, the semester after that, the president of the Associated Students was caught drunk behind the wheel and had possession of marijuana. Someone who literally represented the student body. And now I don't remember why I told you that. But as an English major, I came to conflate American and Anglophone as the same, meaning whatever is considered American literature is also Anglophone. Is literature written by people who use English now, either as a spoken medium or as one of the languages that they write. And I never even thought to question that. So what of all the other writers in this country that have written in languages other than English? Are they also American? Is American the same thing as Anglophone? Is American the same thing as English? Especially for a country that takes pride in having differentiated itself, having severed its ties from the United Kingdom. That should be a very pronounced case, and yet it isn't. So look at just a few examples. On the left, you have a German language newspaper. No, not published in Berlin or Hamburg, but published, circulated, and read in Wisconsin. And then in the middle, you have the Talking Shop Poets, which is a bilingual poetry group that my mentor from community college, Adriana Arancibia, created in order to take poetry into spaces that normally one wouldn't encounter them. So taco shops where working class people would come, take their lunch breaks, enjoy some tacos before going to work, and they would show up to these venues, read poetry, and they would be often accompanied with music. And this too is American literature. Then on the right, you have the Syrian writer Afifa Karam, who wrote the very first novel in the Arabic language not in Damascus, but in Manhattan, New York. And there was a community of people that read her work, enjoyed it, commented on it. And so this is a multilingual America. You know, something very curious happened in the first term of Donald Trump. The White House website, the Spanish version of it just disappeared overnight. And this is a page that, by the way, had archival history going back to, I don't know when they started, basically the whitehouse.gov, but all the presidencies before. And so one would think, is it not enough to terrorize people on the street and racially profile them and smash their windows and detain them, drive the car with their toddlers in the back, or kill them, shoot at them? But like, really, your priority is to remove the Spanish version of whitehouse.gov? Like, why? And that gets me to, oh shit, Donald Trump, that's why you laugh. Yeah, I created this long time ago. This is the first term. This is like, this was before the full-on fact. The symbolic value of us presenting ourselves as a monolingual nation, and even just the slightest hint of us including, accommodating, celebrating other languages goes against the very thing that he believes in. And so I don't know if whitehouse.gov in Spanish is back on, but maybe you can Google that and tell me. I would be shocked to find out. But there are definitely more shocking things happening. This constipated Frenchman said, yet the essence of a nation is that all individuals have many things in common. But more importantly, they have forgotten many things. So it's not just that we all remember the revolution in a certain light, the civil war in a certain light, the American story of, supposedly persecuted people crossing the ocean to come and found a new country, genocide and enslavement, minor details, as is presented to us. but also we have forgotten many things together. And that shared amnesia is also what binds us together. And that shared amnesia is very much multilingualism, the fact that we have been and we still are a multilingual nation. So this manufactured amnesia only serves the myth of monolingualism and cultural singularity. And to best defy that, we must develop awareness, translation literacy, being curious about translation, not just as this very curious, specific transfer from one language to another, but as very much like the mode through which we talk to each other, we produce knowledge, we engage knowledge. This is very much the norm. And what capitalism always does so well, and if my wife were here, she would say, oh, there you go, capitalism. It took 5 minutes. And I would say, yes. And you're lucky it didn't come out in the first minute because I was busy with the drug bust and everything. We don't have to rehash that history. What was I saying?
Translation literacy.
Oh, translation literacy. What I totally forgot. Capitalism always presents the exception as the norm, and then it flips it the other way around, the norm as the exception. So the few people that come from disadvantaged backgrounds that somehow make it and become CEOs, somehow this is the norm. Anybody who works hard will ever get there. And then the very norm, which is you are locked into poverty. The zip code into which you are born determines the level at which you participate in society. That somehow is presented as the exception, that you were just lazy, you didn't work hard enough. And this is exactly the same with translation. Our very condition is multilingual. And you find those traces anywhere in the most canonical works of American literature. Walt Whitman, Waldo Emerson, all of these people read other literature. They responded to other literature. And yes, other literature from the East. In fact, Waldo Emerson has a poem in celebration of the Persian poet Sa'di, an excerpt of whose work you read for today. But again, this is a history that is omitted. And then you take into consideration that the fact that only 4% of all that is published in the United States of America is translation from other languages. And then you take from that 4% and a merely 1% of that 4% is work of literature, of poetry, of imaginative prose. And so basically the world reads whatever we produce, but we don't read the world at all, right? You page through an Iranian book review magazine or a Spanish newspaper or a French blog, and it's full of engagement with other perspectives and other languages. And then you go through the New York Review of Books or the London Review of Books or the New Yorker or the Atlantic, and nothing, as if we live in this bubble. So that creates this monumental cultural illiteracy. And this is precisely why when people from outside the US travel here, as vast as this country is, they feel like they are exploring a little village with village-like mentality because we are sealed off from the rest of the world systematically. So one of the things that I'm very proud of to have accomplished is work with donors in our state to establish a translation prize to bring into English works produced in this instance in Persian. And I didn't want to do it in this very exotic manner of, oh, this novel opens a window into modern Iran or modern Afghanistan. I wanted to work with a publisher that has a reputation of a community around it that just wants to pick up a good novel because it's a good novel, not because it was written by someone from Uganda or someone from Zambia or someone from Uzbekistan, but because they wanted to pick up a good novel. And I'm really proud to have been able to convince a Dallas-based publisher to basically partner with us. And this is the first cycle. The author who won it is an Iranian novelist based in Paris, and the translator is an American academic based in Rhode Island. So, what I want to do today is to kind of trace my own life in this country, which I immigrated at the age of 18. And that's what I looked. See how much Professor Medill has made me age. It's not easy for a 39-year-old to have to run from the art building all the way to fisheries, but when you have like 7 panic attacks, what the fuck are you? You were supposed to, excuse me, we're gonna release the text. Excuse me, we're gonna release the text. You knew that was gonna happen. It was just a matter of time. Anyway, so unsexy Harry Potter. So first, actually, no, let me go back to unsexy Harry Potter. So my first job in the US was I was a bagger at Safeway, which in San Diego they call Vons, but same shit. And it was such a terrifying job because I couldn't really, like, my understanding, my comprehension of English was really poor. And they would also have me pick up the phone. And for those of you who've like learned the second language, the worst thing in the world is to like erase the facial, interaction, because you can't even see the person's lips moving or the facial expression. And because you Americans have like a fuck ton of products, like it's not enough to have 2 cereals, but you have to have 1,000,000 cereals, 1,000,000 cigarettes, 1,000,000 Cokes. I mean, in other countries, it's just like 2 flavors, 3 flavors, normal people. But y'all just, I don't know, they asked the cereal with an extinct koala's milk in it, and so they would ask for these products I'd never heard of. And so my instinct would always be to just run. The phone would ring and I would just run. My manager would be like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Clean up aisle 2, And so I was like so hyper focused on avoiding phone calls and also avoiding customers, which back then, by the way, they would make you make eye contact with the customer and saying, "How are you finding everything? Okay, how's your day going?" Which, of course, I hated questions that would invite, an elaborate response. But now I'm so pissed because I go to these stores to shop and no one greets me. I guess that norm is no longer the case. And why couldn't it be back then? And so this one time, one of my coworkers turns out was trying to flirt with me. And I mean, completely. She starts me and she's like, "Hey, you should need some company sometime." And I'm like, "Bitch, it's my company. I've been working here." And then later somebody said, "Yo, she's trying to flirt with you." I'm like, do I look like do I look like I can be flirted with? I just want to survive an 8-hour shift and just go home and cry into my pillow. But that just let me know that there is a barrier. And it's not just linguistic, it's just like lack of exposure to people that come to English from a different background, right? You go to other countries, you ask a question, and then they respond, and then you say, "Hey, can you slow down?" And they literally speed up. And that shows you that they have had very little interaction with immigrants. And so they just can't even, the mind cannot wrap itself around, "Yo, this is a different person." So like seriously, I was just trying to get the cereals right. Like flirtation was not at all on my radar. Then I go to community college, I learn English, I learn all the cereals and the cigarettes and all the shit varieties that capitalism gives you to create the illusion that you have freedom of choice. And then I go to San Diego State and I major in English because I loved being pushed and challenged. But there is no talk of translation. There is no talk of other languages. And as the only kid with an accent in the classroom, I felt like I didn't have a way to contribute. And so in one of my American lit class, I read Anne Moody's Coming of Age in Mississippi. She is a contemporary of Martin Luther King who fought for civil rights and Black liberation. And I approached my Canadian professor and I said, "Hey, what if I write my essay on maybe just like translating the first chapter of this book into Persian?" And then I reflect on it. And he said, "Sure, do it." And then in that process, I realized, wow, what an amazingly generative and reflective space is open between one language and another. Not that the idea of blackness doesn't exist in the Iranian case, or that Iran did not practice slavery, both of which are true. But the concept of race in the US is so distinct. It is so rooted in laws, and a person's blood would be measured. I mean, even the Nazis, when they were actual Nazis, not talking about Trump, um, when they were codifying their Nuremberg racial laws, they looked at the American Jim Crow laws and they thought to themselves, man, these people really go too far. Specifically because if a person had 1/4 of black blood in them, they would be considered black. Whereas the way the Nazis implemented it, if you had, Jewish blood in you, 1/4 or Roma or whatnot, there are circumstances under which you would be considered Aryan, and basically white. And so these differences, or how do you carry over the N word, which has such venom and historical charge to it, into a language where that does not have the same ring. And so all of these questions really, really stayed with me. And I just wanted to keep thinking about translation. Then I went to Latin America for a year, which I highly recommend. You don't have to go to Latin America, but I highly recommend leaving the US for a while. It's such a wonderful thing to go abroad and teach English and basically get paid to travel and learn a different language and not be involved in this rat race of, oh my God, I'm 22, When people come to me and they say, I'm 22 and my life is slipping away from me, I just want to slap myself. And no, I usually tell them about my sciatica and eczema and anti-anxiety medication. The fact that I have to deal with Professor Miguel and all this stuff. Oh my God, you're here. I'm so sorry. So sorry. But in Latin America, I had a bunch of experiences, one of which I'll tell you. So I took a bus from the state of Michoacan to Querétaro for a job interview because I really, really hated my job. I had to live in a house with rats. Not people who stitch, actual rats. And just need to clarify that. And I arrived around 3 a.m. and I just didn't know what to do. So I just was roaming around in the plaza. And this gentleman comes up to me with broken Spanish and he goes, hey, where's the pharmacy around? I literally got off the bus. I am as fresh OB as it gets. And I'm like, well, where are you from? And he said, I am from Chiapas, which is the state neighboring Guatemala in the south. And in that moment, and the fear in him and his broken Spanish, because he speaks in Mayan language, coming from a persecuted community that has had a deeply conflictual history with the Mexican federal state that dispossessed them, displaced them, continued to terrorize them because they're indigenous. I thought to myself, who's the foreigner? Me as an Iranian American who's working, at the time I was actually working illegally in Mexico. Round up the illegals, excuse me, they're coming to Mexico, you're stealing your jobs. And I was totally working on the table because my employer didn't want to get a visa for me because it was expensive. So I just have a lot of apologies to make to my Mexican friends for going over there and working illegally. And this poor man, who is by definition a Mexican citizen, and yet he had to leave his family in Chiapas, come to a wealthy state where the majority of the population is Criollo, kind of white, mixed, and work. And then also have that linguistic disadvantage on top of that. So that really made me cognizant of the social space of languages and how they live in this hierarchy. And it doesn't really take a lot to unmask this. Then there comes grad school. I came back from Mexico and against my better judgment, I did what Professor Medill also did, which worked towards a PhD. And I specifically put that picture because later on, I found out that I totally put my cap like upside down. So I looked like a fucking portobello mushroom and no one told until all the photos were taken with all my professors, with my family. And so I tried to hide all of them. And my diploma is of, it's, in the bathroom, you have to kind of close the door to see it, because that's the only place that's appropriate to put one's diploma in. Anywhere else, and it would be so douchey. In the bathroom, appropriate. And there I took classes, a lot of classes on translation. Then I realized, why do we always think of translation in this very negative frame, that is always loss, it's always betrayal? The translator is someone who betrays the original meaning. The original is this authoritative, amazing work that the translation as copy can never reach its status. And that is very much, and this is where your professor knows so much more than me, is the result of the kind of late biblical culture of translation, where you have this anxiety of translating the Bible, whether from the original languages or Latin, into languages of people who were colonized. So take the example of the Philippines, where the Spanish colonized these beautiful islands and wanted to indoctrinate them and convert them into Christianity. And all the while they are translating the Bible into the local languages like Tagalog, they're also framing it as flawed and imperfect. One, because they wanted to police meaning and who gets to read the Bible. And number two is because they were so afraid that the Filipinos would interpret the Bible in a way to empower themselves. And this is exactly what happens in Latin America. At some point, a discourse called liberation theology takes form. So Gustavo Gutierrez, Ernesto Cardenal, Pablo Freire, I think that's his first name. They basically say to themselves, well, wait a second. The Vatican has been screwing us over. This form of Christianity is totally out of lockstep with the material condition of poor Latin Americans who've been ravaged by first European colonizers and now by US imperialism. We need a Christianity that is brought into harmony with our quest for liberation, for dignity. And so this culture of biblical transition very much has impacted the way we think of translation as negative. But in reality, translation is a negotiation among cultures, is mediation. And mediation is, whether it's somebody translating for you or a professor or a commentator or a rabbi or an imam, this is part of life. Again, this is not the exception, is the norm. We access everything through barriers, through mediation. Then in 2017, Trump was elected and I became an angry brown, which is totally the stereotype, but I became the stereotype. I was angry all the time. And at some point, my wife said, oh my God, you're so insufferable. She doesn't talk like that, but it's so much more fun to make her talk like that. She's like, you gotta channel your anger. I mean, this is just not good. And so I started volunteering for an organization called the East Bay Sanctuary Covenant, based in Berkeley, California, that has worked with Central American asylum seekers since the 1980s. Basically, before the 1980s, asylum, which is the protection a state gives you for being persecuted for your sex, sexual orientation, political affiliation, your religious beliefs, and whatnot, only applies to white people escaping from countries with which we had adversarial relationships. So Cubans, for instance, and particularly white Cubans, we didn't want black Cubans for something called anti-blackness. And a lot of people fleeing the Soviet Union were welcome. However, Central America was mostly, consisted of countries that were our allies. We were funding their genocide. We were training their military. And so when Salvadorans and Guatemalans began to move their, come up to the United States, the Reagan administration very much denied them asylum, even though they all had a legitimate case for it. So this is a really good example that Christianity doesn't have to be the religion for the glorification of wealth and private jets and mega churches and whatnot. This is actually an example of Christianity as a civic religion, as truly embodying what Jesus Christ stood for. So 5 congregations joined together in Tucson, Arizona, and Berkeley, California, and they said, fuck the Reagan administration, we will provide asylum to these people, we will open our churches, our communities, and we will not allow the government to deport these people. It took a long, long time for asylum to even be codified into our law. It was like 1990. It was an international convention, but the US Congress only acknowledged it in 1990. And this organization has been working with asylum seekers since then. So I began to use the skills I gained in Mexico by interpreting for asylum seekers there. And one interview really stood out to me. So there was a Guatemalan family, and very common story. They had run away to the forest once the federal government began basically burning their village. And I wrote down the entirety of the story, and then I would like go to the director's office, and I would say, hey, this is the story. What do you think? Can we represent them? And then he said, well, we need to have dates. We need to have dates for everything, because you go to court and they ask you, well, when did you leave? When did you go back? They want to make sure that there are no discrepancies in the story. So I went back and I said, hey, do you remember what year, what month it was when you ran away to the mountains? And they would say, around 1982, 83, 84. I'm like, that I can't, you're going to lose your case. And then I went back to the director and he said, you're not asking the right questions. Calendar, our calendar doesn't mean anything to farmers and villagers in Guatemala. You have to ask, did you leave after your second child was born or before your second child? When you ask someone, have you been persecuted? That term doesn't mean anything, because that vocabulary is not at all in harmony with the lived experience of these people. So when I would say, han experimentado persecución, they would always nod. See, and that's what you do as a polite person, you just nod. And I also realized that my clients would nod because they were beaten down for not understanding Spanish, because they come from Maya-speaking communities. And so without knowing, I was re-traumatizing. So then instead of saying, hey, have you been persecuted? I would say, did anybody make fun of the way you dress? Did somebody physically harm you for the way you speak? Would people say things to you? And then there would come, instead of one nod, would come an answer of like 45 minutes of detail. The most chilling sentence I have ever heard in my life was somebody told this man that you are not God's child. You people are not of God. No son de Dios. And I thought this man was at least 20, 30 years older than me. Then when I said, what is your date of birth? He said, 1986, the same that I was in. But man, life had not been kind to him. So, you know, in the scheme of things, you're really not that bad, Professor. And so I, again, like working as an advocate, and to this day really has made me aware that translation, linguistic literacy is a matter of life and death. It's not just an academic pursuit for someone to publish some silly article in some self-important journal and put it on their douchey CV and then hang their diploma in the bathroom, look like a portobello mushroom. It's a matter of life and death often. Then at the University of Washington, along with these wonderful colleagues, I helped run this platform called the Translation Studies Hub, which brings together anybody who's interested in multilingualism, in translation. We've had some incredible events I remember a Bangladeshi young scholar telling us about how language was used to erase basically the suffering of the victims of sexual assault. Because in Bangladesh, as in so many other cultures, being a victim of sexual assault comes with a lot of shame. During interviews, these women would deny that they were raped. And so these silences, according to the Western notion of translation, this biblical notion that you have to translate word by word, you cannot intervene in the text. These silences would work against these women's case for justice. And so she argued that the role of the translator is actually very much to intervene and to fill these silences with culture and explain these silences under cultural terms and make visible the injustices that these women experience and the justice that they're trying to seek. Don't have time for that. Yeah, I guess we can have time for that. You know, the history of the 20th century is one of nationalism, is this idea, this false idea that nations take form cohesively, organically around a shared group of people. That it is not an accident of history that the United States is the United States because we have shared cultures and common roots. And then this is the history that they tell you. And then brown people, black people come and they somehow complicate this. I mean, people like Samuel, what's his name? Samuel Huntington? That douchebag who used to teach at Harvard? But are there people who are not douchebag who teach at Harvard? I don't know. We discussed that during the day. This civilizational paradigm is very much rooted in this idea that cultures are already pretty organically sealed off from one another. There is such a thing as a Latin American civilization. There's such a thing as an Islamic civilization, and you can map it out, rather neatly. When the world has always been, people have always been on the move. Languages have always affected one another. There is no proper place to which religions, languages, and people belong. So you're Chinese and you live in New York, you're not out of place. You're Pakistani and you live in London, you're not out of place. What is out of place is exactly this form of thinking, which is only to solidify division. So this gentleman, Samuel Huntington, who basically came up with the term clash of civilizations. I don't know how many of you have heard this term. That's a good thing. Is it like the first time I asked you who's seen Aladdin and no hands go up because you're embarrassed? Who has seen Aladdin, by the way? Just remind me. Oh, mashallah. Really good. Did your hand go up too? Yay. Let me know if you find my flying carpet. What was I saying? Oh, the essay in which he formulates his idea of clash of civilization doesn't mention once colonialism. Such a convenient omission. He basically says, look, the world has always consisted of civilizations. Some civilizations are bound to run into conflict with one another. For instance, the West and Islam are now in some sort of civilizational confrontation because we just don't have shared values. In the West, we believe in rational inquiry. Excuse me, climate change is a hoax. We believe in freedom of expression, unless you oppose the genocide Israel commits, then we don't believe in that. We believe in religious tolerance, but freedom of religion, but we don't really believe in freedom from religion. And of course, treatment of women, which is my favorite thing. Every time we want to bomb a brown country, we somehow say, oh, I mean, it's when all excuses and pretexts fail, we say, oh, it's to liberate the woman. But I would personally love to liberate the woman of Idaho I really think they should be liberated. I think we should deploy the National Guard to Washington State and just get all the women out of Idaho. They don't deserve to live there. And I would lead the charge. I know I'm a wimp. I've never fought in my life. It was always first with my sciatica. I'm looking at the clock because I want to see. You know, before nationalism, I want to say these concepts were very much plural and in flux, and they still are. Your ethnicity is one thing, your lineage is another, your origin is another, your homeland is another, but you also accrue homelands. Why is it that most immigrants, and not just immigrants, like anybody who doesn't look white, they fret being asked, where are you from? That really shouldn't be a terrifying question at all, but it is terrifying because where are you from is rooted in this assumption that you are where you're born. Because if you ask me where I'm from, I spent 18 years of my life in Iran, 15 years in California, 1 year in Mexico, and 6 years in Washington State. And I am from all of those places, truly all of those places. And they all mean something different. But when people ask, where are you from? We all know what they mean. And again, this is like this idea that nationalism collapses all of these distinct concepts onto each other. This is what happens, right? And this is the playbook of every nationalist project. In Spain, under the dictatorship of Franco, they would say España única y grande, one unified Spain that is rooted in whiteness, Catholicism, and the Castilian language, right? And if you are from the Basque region or the Catalonia region, good luck. If you were caught speaking other languages, they would actually tell you, habla cristiano, speak Christian, which is an insane expression, because again, it shows like these categories of race, religion, and language collapsing onto one another. And I don't have to tell you that this is very much the doing of colonialism. So in the case of Persian, a lot of people associated with the state of Iran alone. But in fact, it has always had and continues to have life well outside the boundaries of Iran. In Afghanistan, it is still a spoken language by millions of people. In Tajikistan, in parts of Uzbekistan, and in the growing diaspora of Persian speakers in places like Toronto, Vancouver, Los Angeles, and to, again, associate the language with just one territory is the very premise of racialization. As you can see, it would have been nice if I had arrived early, but let me, you know, in India, when the British arrive and colonize the subcontinent, they encounter a deeply, intensely, wildly multi-religious and multilingual place. But they very much see it through the lens of race. They see Hindus as the indigenous, and they see Muslims as foreigners. And you may ask, well, how long have Muslims lived in India? Like, Muhammad was still alive when Muslims went to the Indian subcontinent through the Sindh Valley. And I love this one passage from Mahatma Gandhi's The Story of My Experiments with Truth, where he says, Hindus under British rule were told, you need to study Sanskrit because that is your culture. And Muslims were told, you need to study Persian. And one day during the break, I was talking with one of my Muslim friends, and he said, dude, like Sanskrit grammar is so complex. Persian grammar is a walk in the park. The language doesn't have gender. It doesn't have, grammatical cases. It's very straightforward. So Gandhi skips Sanskrit and goes to his Persian class. And then the next day, his Sanskrit teachers scold him and is like, Mahatma, you betrayed your ancestors. And this is exactly the idea of nationalism. Whereas for centuries before, Hindus were amazing poets and scribes in Persian. Now all of a sudden, Hindu equals India equals indigenous. And this is exactly how the partition happens and Pakistan becomes a state. And if you think the foundation of the state of Israel led to catastrophes, which of course it did, in the case of Pakistan, it led to millions of people displaced, millions of people slaughtered. The Pakistani army killed so many Bangladeshis that to this day that trauma runs deep. Don't have time for this. Definitely don't have time for that. You know what I want to do? I want to actually have a brief conversation with your professor to hear what she heard in this presentation, how she would connect it to what has been covered in this class. I think that the debriefing is always something that brings closure, ties up the loose ends. And so if you don't mind, please join me. I just really, for the last 10 minutes, I want to pick your brain about all of these issues. And I also want to hear from you. I really, really, really do. So, Professor Miguel, apart from the buffoonery, which you have come to expect, what resonated with you? What were you able to connect with?
So I think what's really interesting here, if we think back to what we talked about at the beginning of the quarter about language and multilingualism, we talked about language rights, we talked about language policies, we talked about these kinds of issues. You can see how in the issues of translation that we're talking about today, a lot of the same problems that we were discussing that time are kind of coming back. A lot of this complexity is coming back, but as you guys can see, it's even more complicated than we were able to talk about before. That was kind of the major thing that I was connecting with here.
Absolutely. So let's hear from you. Let's hear from you.
Who in here speaks a language other than English? However bad. It's okay to be terrible. I'm terrible at many different languages.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay, we've got a lot of multilingual folks in here.
And we have monolinguals who don't know they're not monolingual.
Okay, yeah. Yes, we could have a whole conversation about this. Yes. So, have any of you guys ever had experiences where you were in a place where someone wanted to operate with you in one of your languages and that felt uncomfortable, or you were trying to operate in a language and they didn't seem to want to operate in that language with you? Has anyone ever had that experience? Yeah? Anyone want to tell us about it? Haley, go for it.
Oh, so I'm half Japanese and I speak some. So I was my freshman year, my chemistry lab partner, tall, like very much looks like a wee guy, just starts speaking to me in Japanese, and I'm like, we're doing chem lab. I was born in the United States. Like this is not the appropriate time to be trying to speak with me in Japanese right now.
Okay, yes, understood. Caleb?
I spent 3 years in Germany, and they generally get mad at you if you try to speak German and you're not good at it. And so they almost always revert to English. As soon as you open your mouth, their attitude completely changes negatively. So
That's not welcoming.
yeah, no, they generally speak English better than a lot of people that natively speak English. So I mean, but their attitude changes dramatically.
Was it the president of Liberia who was in the White House when Trump, which speaks English as an official language, and he turns to them and says, "Your English is so good. Where did you learn English?" I know, ignorant as fuck. Why are you biting the lip? I do have a really good story. I do have. Oh yes, please.
Oh, I was just, could you repeat the question again? I may have the magic story there.
If you've ever had a time where you've been trying to operate in a language and someone didn't wanna be in that language with you, or if someone was trying to use a language with you that you weren't comfortable.
Yeah, okay, so, this was a long time ago, so, I think I was in like this kind of preschool kind of school, like, obviously a long time ago, and, back then, my family and was more speaking, Spanish in my household. And, I guess the people that were in charge of that place didn't like, I didn't really, I was too young to comprehend it, but, my mom later like realized that they actually didn't like me speaking Spanish, and so they bravely tried to force me to not speak Spanish. And so that's ended up making me leave that place and go to a different place.
Have you been able to forge a different relationship with Spanish then?
Honestly, not really, but I think it may just be because we don't really speak Spanish that much anymore, in my household. Not because of that, but like, it kind of just slowly became more used English. But like, I'm not really proficient in it. My mom is. My siblings are more than I do, but that's just about it.
Thanks for sharing.
Anyone else have a story? Yeah,
I'm from Central Asia. My second language is Russian. So because of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which is for understandable reasons, some of my Ukrainian friends basically don't know speaking Russian language anymore. So yeah, again, very interesting.
That's such a great example of language connected to imperialism.
Yeah, which is sometimes might be hard when we are hanging out with our post-Soviet Union like country people, well, we cannot find it. It's great.
Does your Soviet club admit a non-Soviet ground people who would like to join? Okay, I'll send an application. I was that same grocery store, Safeway, where I got my first job. This gentleman, this white gentleman comes in, old, and for some reason he knew I was Iranian, so he greeted me in Persian. I'm like, wow, that's wonderful. Where did you learn the language? And he said, I was taken hostage by your people. And I'm like, damn. And I don't, like normally you don't know how to come back from that. So I awkwardly said, Pardon say because what else can you say? So yeah, that happened again. Like people that apparently were held hostage in Iran usually find me and they let me know. But it's just not our fault. We're like really hospitable. You come there and you're not. Jesus. Other examples. Who here thinks they're monolingual? I'd like to know. You think you're monolingual? Make a case. Make a case. Come on.
That's Somali. Like my parents go Somali and Arabic, and they didn't really teach me. I just heard English through that. You know.
When you hear Somali music, what does it make you feel?
I used to just listen to Arabic or listen to Somali, and just feel like kind of annoying to me right now. Yeah, it's kind of seem annoying, but like recently I just listening to more Arabic and Swahili to get attention.
Don't you think that exposure helped to kind of create that receptivity in you? You're not monolingual. Nobody is. You just think of it. That's monolingual. Anybody else would like to convince me that they're monolingual? I'll give you $20 if you win. We could say monolingual is okay. Okay. Well, again, I'm so sorry for being late. It was an honest mistake. Nothing to do with my flying carpet. But I hope this hour was worthwhile for you.
all right, thank you guys very much. Remember, it's not fun to talk next week. I will be here. I will see you after that. Yeah, we're all my junk.
What John? I'll walk with you.
Yes.
So this is how I made them stuff. First we have flag.
Take it.
Yes.
I managed to. The first half of my class, then I came here and that's in my head, I'm like, oh, 1:30 to 2:30. Why did I need to put this? Why would I know? I didn't even make sense.
How to do the references, just take a consistent style, it doesn't have to be any specific style. You just need enough information that someone could find that resource.
So
So you don't need a full record. It- it's not needed. Enough information. In fact, I would really, just put them on the Google.
Yeah, I still don't know how I made the mistake.
It's okay, you're not the first or even the second person to do this.
Oh.
I need to take out like a large neon sign. Like